Hello, everyone. It's Donna Miller here from C3 Workplace. Just want to give everyone maybe one more minute to join us. So I will be back to you in just a short time. Thanks for joining us. I'll be right back. Okay. Happy Wednesday to everyone. It's Donna Miller here, President and Founder of C3 Workplace. First of all, a couple of little housekeeping items. You are all muted, and if you need to ask any questions, please use the chat window. There is a teleconference number that you need to call into. If you have any technical difficulties, because I'm a great multitasker, but I'm not that great, feel free to call my office at 973-783-7900, and the gals in the office can walk you through any technical difficulties. So we're recording this. You can get a copy later. You're all muted. And as you have questions, feel free to, as I said, submit them via the chat window. I think most of you probably know me and are aware of C3 Workplace, but just to kind of backtrack and start there, almost 20 years ago, I opened my first shared office facility in Montclair under the brand Above and Beyond. We've had the great good fortune over the last 20 years to help over 1,000 businesses to start and grow. And about 2 years ago, I decided that it made sense to rebrand the company. And so Above and Beyond became the brand you now know, which is C3 Workplace, and that stands for Connect, Collaborate, Community. The reality is we give small businesses and entrepreneurs the tools they need to grow their business. That might be office space, flexible office space, it might be administrative support, it might be telephone answering, virtual office, or bookkeeping. But the reality is what I love and my vision for this business is that by connecting small business owners, encouraging them to collaborate, we will build this business community of small businesses and in turn be able to help our local economy. We're seeing it happen. It's very exciting. So as you may also know, I have the location in Montclair, and about, my goodness, hard to believe it's over a year ago, we opened in Florida, and we are working on 3 more locations in the next 4 years. So very exciting stuff for us, but that's not really what we're here to talk about today. So what we're going to talk about is delegation, letting go to grow, and start with your bookkeeping. You know, when I first started doing this topic, I used to actually call it delegation, let go or be dragged, because that's kind of how I felt when I first realized something's got to give. So the reality is, you know, where do you begin the process of delegating? The truth is, we all started our businesses for wonderful reasons. We were following our passion. We wanted to control our own destiny. We wanted to do something that had meaning. There's many, many different reasons. But when you find yourself at 2 a.m. Doing any type of work and working so many hours that you wonder, what the heck was I thinking? You know, it's time to take a really good hard look at what you're doing and see if there isn't a better way to do it. The reality is there currently, or very soon, 40% of the U.S. working population will be self-employed. Excuse me. That's a pretty amazing number, and I think there's a lot of things that go into that. I, for one, can't imagine doing anything else. But when I started my business 20 years ago, it was myself, a partner, and a part-timer. We now have 12 employees. I have, over the last couple of years, been able to take an entire summer off, and the following summer I worked part-time. And I did that because I learned to delegate. So that may not be the case for you, so I want to try and bring this down today to kind of a simple process that you might begin to think about, what is it that I can delegate, how do I do it, and how do I manage it. So as any new project starts with, it really needs to start with some analysis. I have a time tracking tool when I work with clients in a group setting or individual consulting. I encourage them for 2 weeks to track their time and their tasks. The reality is you don't really realize how much time you're spending doing something unless you're actually doing that tracking. So I encourage you to use an Excel sheet. You can email me for the time tracking tool. I'm happy to share it with you. But do a spreadsheet of how you're spending your time. And I want you to categorize that time into 3 categories. And those 3 categories are things I must do, things I should do, and your core competencies. Now, once you have that spreadsheet and you've got a visual, because I'm also a visual person, that's important to me, you will see that you should come up with a table that looks something like this. Okay, so this might be your table of tasks. This is, of course, fictitious, but during 2 weeks of the tracking, we spent 2 hours on paying bills, managing expenses, and working on collections. Side note, if you're doing the sales, you absolutely should not be doing the collections. Those should be 2 very separate relationships. So perhaps in a week you spend 2 hours doing that. You might have website updates that need to be done on a regular basis. Well, that's something you should delegate, but maybe it's not going to be the first thing you're able to delegate. So there's another hour and a half. And go through the list. You've got database updates. You know, you're going out to all these networking events. You're trying to maximize your time. And there's great apps to streamline some of these things. But database updates, probably not the best use of your time. Project ramp up. If I get a new client on board, that's my core competency. That's what I have to focus on. So that stays over here in the core competency column. But as part of that project ramp up, there might be a kickoff email. I don't need to do that. We can let someone else do that. New business calls. That's something that I think I'm pretty good at, so I want to do that myself, although I have to say I do now have help in that area as well. So basically, you end up with this chart that has different categories of work. Now, let's take that a little further, because this is where I really want to start with this webinar today. I want to really talk about, you know, what's the ROI? The reality is a lot of people are in business for themselves, and they know they're doing too much, but they say, how can I do this? I just don't have the money. I have to say that at some point you have to decide to invest in your business, because you simply cannot grow your business or sustain your business if you're burnt out. So of those 2 columns that we looked at on the prior slide, there were actually 6 hours of tasks that fell into the must delegate and should delegate. So I want you to think about, if you got 6 hours back per week, 24 hours a month, what might you do with that? Well, if you're like me, one of the ways that you get new business is by new business dials. I'm not talking about cold calling. I'm talking about reaching out to existing customers and asking for referrals. Perhaps I haven't connected to all the people in the chamber that I belong to. So I guess I might call those lukewarm calls. They could be emails. Another thing I find to be a very effective use of my time in networking lately is working on LinkedIn. I've upgraded my account and I do in-messages. So if you had 24 hours more per month because you got rid of those tasks that probably aren't your core competency, might even be causing you a whole lot of stress, what would you do with that time? Okay, if you did new business dials, this is my favorite part of the seminar. 15 dials per hour. Trust me, I do this. I know it's possible. That's 360 phone calls per month. I know it's overwhelming. Nobody wants to do it. But I just want you to focus on the ROI of getting back 6 hours per month. Okay, so that's 360 calls. Say, out of 360 calls, you get 10% close ratio per proposal. We're not talking about business. That would be 36 proposals a month. If you are lucky enough these days to have a 50% close ratio on proposals, which, you know, that's something that's changed over the years too, that would be 18 new projects with clients per month. I know. Really? Okay, cut it in half. 9. If you work 24 more hours on new business development, would you get 9 new clients or projects? Be really conservative, cut it in half again. 4, be uber conservative. 2 new clients. So I ask you, if you were to delegate and pay for someone else to do 6 hours of crazy work that you shouldn't be doing anyway, and you took that time and focused back on new business development, if you're not getting your ROI, then you have to take a good hard look at your sales process. But the reality is, if somebody handed me 24 hours per month, I have to say, it wouldn't all be about new business development. It might be doing something that's relaxing. It might be attending, you know, a child's baseball game or something like that. So the reality is, you can't do it all, and you can get an ROI. So the reality is, if you invest the money to have someone else do it, this is how you get the money back, hopefully in spades. It works for me. It's how I built my organization. So that's the ROI, and that's why I'm hoping to entice you to take this approach. It may not be that you can do all of this at once, but this is the approach I want you to think. I want you to think like an organization and look at it in these terms. So the reality is, when you start to delegate, you know, what's the process? I mean, how do you start the process? So you've already done this time tracking. So in reality, what you were doing while you did that time tracking was you were actually creating little mini job descriptions. You can document the procedures, test the protocols. Internally, we have written procedure and protocol for everything we do, also called standard operating procedures. Test them. Test them on a new person. Have a new person write them. And use screenshots within those protocols. And the reason I say that, here's something as simple as, I have an intern that started with me this week, and I wanted to give her some data entry. Now, not a terribly difficult thing to do, but because I've given this data entry to so many different people, I have written protocol with screenshots. I didn't have to explain anything. I just was able to hand it to her. So I don't like to have to do the same things twice. So that protocol allows you to hand it off to different people, and that's also how you create scalability. So start the process by looking at the task and the processes involved in the task. Delegating could be an entire webinar, but basically, these are the 5 different levels of delegation that I work with my team. Level 1 is, and I'm going to say this later in the next slide, but it's assume nothing, check everything. Level 2, now you're going to have them do the research. You're going to have them make a recommendation to you. Now you want to kind of get inside their head and understand how they think. Level 3, have them do an action plan as well. Level 4, they make the decision. Level 5 is full delegation. I can tell you it was only in the last 2 years that I did any level 5 delegation. I didn't have it, you know, you need to have a really long working relationship with someone to do full delegation. Level 4 is high praise for anyone if you're willing to give them something and let them make the decision. And you have to work with people at the level that you're comfortable with, and I start everyone at level 1. If I don't know them, I don't care how much experience they have, they may not have the same style as me. So delegate smart. Don't just over-delegate and under-communicate, which definitely leads me to what I said before, which is assume nothing and check everything. Create checkpoints within your process. Over-communicate. Shadow the person. Monitor them. Continue to document and have them documented. I was at a networking event this morning, and I spoke with someone who's struggling with bringing someone on to help her. And she said she's very OCD and she's a perfectionist. And I said to her, you have to let go of that. You're never going to get the same 100%, well, 120% that you might deliver from the people that you delegate to. But it is incumbent upon you to create checkpoints so they don't go down a rabbit hole for 6 hours doing something that you don't want them to do. So if it's a documented procedure, then chances are they should be able to walk through that documented procedure without too much help from you, but you still should check it. And as time goes by, you'll develop a bit of a rhythm and you'll be able to be less involved. But when you are working on something like, for instance, say you wanted to delegate some research. You need someone to create a list of 50 associations because in those 24 hours you came back, you want a list of people that you should be calling on. Whenever I assign research, I do it in 1 hour increments. Work on this for 1 hour, come back to me and tell me where you're at. Because I want to make sure we are both talking about the same thing. So those are just some tips on how to delegate. We talked about, first of all, we talked about tracking your time, crunching the numbers, breaking down the task, delegating, and how to manage that relationship. And I can't say enough that if you're looking for someone to just hand everything off to and not have any involvement, it may not be what you ultimately really need. You have to be part of the process. You shouldn't be part of the process for very long. You shouldn't have to manage that person. Ultimately, the person you delegate these tasks to, and I will speak specifically about bookkeeping in a minute, they should be managing you. Because the reality is, chances are the things you are delegating are somebody else's core competency, so they should be better than you. You know, we've heard it said when we're networking or we're masterminds, we want to be at a table. I want to be at a table with people who are smarter than me. Same thing when you're delegating. Make sure you get the right expertise. I have had small business owners come to me, and they have been challenged because their first delegation was to someone, perhaps their neighbor's daughter was home from college, and they thought, let me give this a try. Well, that's okay if you have a lot of very simple routine work, repetition, repetition, repetition. You have to really be careful about who you bring on board because, as we all know, in life, you get what you pay for. So that brings me to who to delegate to. I believe that the best way is to ask for a referral from a trusted colleague. You know, if you were going to look for a lawyer or an accountant, you would probably ask your trusted colleagues. You probably would not go on the internet to look for, oh, I don't know, a divorce attorney. The second place, if you are not able to get a referral from a trusted colleague, I would go to professional association. There is an association. If you're talking about this type of work that I've mapped out here, there's an association called the International Association of Virtual Assistants, and there are tons of resources in there. If you are looking for bookkeeping help, you can go to the QuickBooks Pro Advisor site where they have all their people who are certified Pro Advisors listed. So I'm gonna bring this to bookkeeping and why I think you should delegate your bookkeeping first. I have worked with so many different business owners who are great lawyers, great marketing people, great consultants of various types, perhaps they're designers, architects. I've yet to meet any one of those who are actually a good bookkeeper. I often say that Intuit does firms like mine who provide bookkeeping services a great service when they hinge their entire advertising campaign on how simple QuickBooks is to use. What I have to say to that is garbage in, garbage out. If you don't know what you're doing, you can make such a hairy mess out of your QuickBooks file. We have had people come to us that have spent years or hours and hours doing things wrong in QuickBooks, and then you can't fix it. So the reality is the numbers are stressful, so there's a great reason to delegate them. When you remove stress from your life, it's like this cloud is lifted from your eyes and you can see greater opportunities. The other reason is, and if you read my blog or you follow what I do, I am a huge proponent. I firmly believe that you cannot grow a business without knowing your numbers. And you need outside help to help you set up your bookkeeping properly so that what you put in will generate the reports you need to manage your business. Those reports might be a standard P&L, which you should understand how to read a standard P&L. I think many people do. But it goes a step further. It's really about managing cash flow. We all have crunches, but the reality is knowledge is power, and you can work with a bookkeeper to be able to see those crunches coming and plan accordingly. I'm not saying cash flow is easy. I'm not saying having a good bookkeeper will mean you don't have cash flow problems again. But the reality is, if you see it coming, you can try to do something about it. But it's also about profitability. Sometimes I'll say to clients, I just started working with a new marketing firm, great gal, and she said to me, what are your most profitable services? Great question. I can actually answer that question because that's where I'm going to put my marketing mojo. I'm not going to put my marketing dollars into something that has a very slim profit margin. So the reason you should outsource your bookkeeping, so the title of the seminar is Delegation, Letting Go to Grow, and Start with Your Bookkeeping. The reason I say that is because you might be able to do your QuickBooks, but unless finances are part of your core competencies, you won't be able to create the financial literacy that is necessary to grow your business. It could be as simple as, honestly, when we work with people, it's got to start with a personal budget. What is your personal budget? What do you need to make? And then it goes into a business budget. Business budgets prevent you from possibly making emotional decisions. So I really don't want to harp on this subject, but I want to convey my sincere belief that whether you use C3 Workplace or anyone else for your bookkeeping, it's something you have to really consider getting rid of. And the nice thing about outsourcing is you're not making a lifelong commitment. I would encourage you to say, okay, I can budget, I don't know, $200 a month for the next 6 months. That's $1,200. Now I have to look at my ROI. So to me, and this is part of thinking in numbers, once you start to develop the ability to think in numbers, you're able to scale your business and you're able to make decisions that are data-driven, and that hold water financially, frankly. Okay, off my soapbox on that because we don't have too much time left. So who to delegate to? Again, QuickBooks Pro advisors, if you're going to do bookkeeping, check references. Ask them for references, check references. Another thing that I've come across in the bookkeeping arena especially, make sure whoever you are working with has professional liability, errors, and omissions insurance. I have had clients come to me because their prior bookkeeper who claimed to be an accountant, so, I'm not even sure how you check credentials if someone says they're an accountant, made a mistake, cost her $30,000. The woman had no insurance. There was nothing she could do. That's a terrible story. So when you work with an outside bookkeeper, ask them. You can ask them to, for evidence of their professional liability insurance. It's an area, especially with all the gosh, look at Target with the credit cards and all the information getting stolen. Frankly, I don't have that much coverage, but anyway, so make sure you ask for the professional liability insurance. All right, we have a few minutes left. Okay, I have a question here from, let me do some questions at this point. How do you work with and around personalities, attitudes in interpreting styles, and differences in communication, especially working with volunteers? Great question, Gail Curtis. How the heck are you? Great question. I would not delegate my bookkeeping to a volunteer. That's point one. Again, that whole E&O thing. I think when you're working with volunteers, one of the things you can do when working with different personalities is very simply give them instructions, ask them to repeat it back to you. Because sometimes I say something and I think it's technically clear, and it's like we were in two different rooms, two different planets, and they just don't get it. So first of all, when I'm working with someone new, I give them the instructions. I ask them to repeat it back to me. I ask them, well, how would you go about accomplishing that? And I want to hear, again, I'm trying to get inside their head a little bit to understand how they process. To give you an example, with the intern that I just brought on board, I said to her during the interview, I said, and honestly, I don't work with interns too much because sometimes they need just too much supervision, but I'm at a point where I have a lot of repetitious things that someone else can supervise. So I said, well, let me ask you a question. If you come across something that's new to you and you don't know how to do it, you're in PowerPoint. What do you do? And she said to me, well, I'm going to click on all the menus up top and see if I see something that makes sense. She said, then I will probably Google it, or I'll go on YouTube to figure it out. And I said, great. That's exactly the same approach I would take. So my answer to your question, Gail, is have a little conversation around how would they approach it so that you can make sure you are on the same page in how you would approach the task. I hope that helps. And again, create checkpoints. Here is another question. I've got time kind of for one more here. So the question here is, I'm not sure I'm comfortable with virtual bookkeeping. Any advice? We hear that all the time. In my opinion, I don't think bookkeeping should be fully virtual. I think there needs to be some face time, because if there was ever an area where trust was more of a factor, that would be it. So my answer to that would be make sure you have some face time, certainly during onboarding, but also going forward. When we work with a client, we typically do some of the onboarding on-site at their facility, if that's possible. We kind of break our work into three phases. Phase one is onboarding. Phase two is getting it humming. And then phase three is we offer controller-level services. So what are the services that you might need to make these numbers work for you? So during phase 1 and phase 2, there's a fair amount of face time, and then once everything is going, we still have quarterly face-to-face meetings. So I think not being comfortable with virtual, I get it. I'm not entirely comfortable with it either. I think the way to approach that is to have a blended approach to working remotely. So maybe that's a better phrase to wrap around your head. It's not virtual, it's remote. And I've got one more question here that I'm going to answer before I start to wrap things up. And this one's kind of a double barrel. It says, what should I expect to pay for outsourced bookkeeping, and how can I control the cost of bookkeeping? I'm not sure which part of that question is more important, but what should I expect to pay for outsourced bookkeeping? Honestly, not to be snide, but that's kind of like saying, how much should I pay for a car? The reality is, you have to go through an assessment with your potential bookkeeper. You have to get a clear scope of services. What we do is during our assessment process, we very specifically lay out the scope of services, and then we have an agreed-to budget. I will say to the client, we think this is going to cost $500 a month, and they sign off on that. I am held accountable to that $500 a month. I can't go over that $500 a month if I don't get client approval. And if my staff goes over and I don't get client approval, that's my time to eat. So what should you expect to pay for it? Difficult to answer. Should you hold your bookkeeper accountable to a budget? Absolutely. And the second part was, how can I control costs? It's hard with labor-based activities to, especially with bookkeeping, your labor-based, you need to be detail-oriented, and there does need to be a little bit of redundancy in bookkeeping because that's some of the checks and balances. But what you can do is you can group activities. You can use streamlining things such as online banking and download the transactions. And another thing is you can use memorized reports and memorized transactions, which are really awesome in QuickBooks. So those are the questions that I have time for today, and I think those of you who know me know that I'm very available. So to recap really quickly, delegation, let go to grow, and start with your bookkeeping. Track your time, break the categories into 3 categories, break the tasks into 3 categories so that you can spend your time focusing on driving revenue. Document your procedures, delegate smartly, don't over-delegate, create checkpoints, over-communicate, ask your person that you're delegating to how they might approach it so you can make sure you're on the same page, and use a professional association or a trusted colleague for a referral, and make sure you check their professional liability, especially if you're talking about bookkeeping. Now, that is pretty much everything I have to say on the delegating piece. But I wanted to tell you all about, some of you know about this, I'm very excited. C3 Workplace, in conjunction with Tommy Hilton, who's awesome, we are doing a Learn and Earn program. Our goal in 2014 is to help you earn more. And how we do it is through some various different programs. So we have a contest going right now. You can enter the contest to win either a $50 seat to our 3-hour kickoff workshop, which will be held January 24th, and or you can win a seat to the full 20-hour course. It's a 7-month program. It's amazing. The first 3 sessions are about financial plan, marketing plan, and behavior plan, because at the end of the day, you got to get up and do the behavior. And after that, it will be a 6-month mastermind accountability program. This is a transforming program. There is lots of information on our website about this program. I am so confident about this 7-month program that I am offering a guarantee in that if you participate in each session, if you do the homework and you go through the 7 months and you're not happy with your results, I will give you your money back. Now, it is invitation, and we are screening people for that program. You can find information on the website. But the way to enter the contest is, let me switch programs here, and I will take you over to the website. But there is a page on the website for the Learn and Earn contest, and you go to the entry page and you answer questions. So here are all the, the fine print for the contest, and then over here you've got an entry page. And I'm not challenging you here, but you enter your name, your email, and the answer to the question. So today's question is, what should I be doing instead of my bookkeeping? And the answer is, you should be driving revenue. So you can enter each time you attend a C3 workplace event. I think we might have one more before the contest is done. But you have another chance. So that really pretty much wraps up what we're doing here today. I want to thank each of you for joining me today. I will send out a follow-up email to this, and there is a recording available. If there's any way that I can help you, please feel free to shoot me an email. If you want information on any of our services, happy to help you with that. So I wish you every success, and I hope that we can be part of you earning more in 2014, and have a great rest of your day. Take care, everyone.